This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this.
This is no longer just a council that has been complicit in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of the town's children. This is a council that, to all extents and purposes, is finished. If this council does not end up in special measures and not taken over in the way Liverpool has been taken over, then I will be amazed. From all of my years working in and around local government, I have never seen anything like it. I have never seen anything like what I witnessed last night. That Andy Burnham turned up just shows how desperate the situation had got. This is the Andy Burnham who wants to become Prime Minister of this country. The man who wants to become Prime Minister of this country, he wants to become a Labour Party leader, and the Prime Minister of this country is neck deep in a scandal of the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of a working class northern town, of the children of a working class northern town. The man who wants to become Prime Minister has been exposed for either lying himself or having been lied to and relaying those lies of how victims of child sexual exploitation in Oldham were having their testimonies listened to by his review team. It is now a matter of fact that at the times he made repeated statements, no such attempts had been made to contact victims. This review, this so-called assurance review, was attempted to be produced without the single testimony of a victim. The one victim that got in, Sophie Sam, did so because of the efforts of Maggie Oliver, and a recording of that testimony reveals further damning revelations. Andy Burnham, the want to be Prime Minister, is either involved in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children, because that's what it is when he misleads you, me and the victims into pretending that their testimonies were being heard by his assurance review team, led by Malcolm Newsom and Gary Ridgway. the mainstream media keep using the word experts when describing him, so that you believe that they are experts. They may be experts, but I think they're experts in something completely different. Either Burnham lied and is involved in this cover-up, or his review team lied to him. There is no ambiguity. As Brian Hoban said last night, there is no wriggle room here. And we, in Oldham, are a very, very different proposition to Rochdale, Rotherham, Telford, Manchester and all the other places. Because what we witnessed last night was we have politicians in the room who will fight for us. We have politicians from across parties, not the Labour Party, obviously, but we have politicians in the room who will fight for us. Now, it's easy for me to talk about Brian and Lewis and Robert, Mark Wilkinson. It's easy for me to talk about those, and I'll get to talking about those. But what I took from last night, what I found most horrific, was the Liberal Democrat councillor Diane Williamson. I think it was Diane Williamson. Correct me if I'm wrong. And people were heckling her, and I wasn't looking forward to what she'd said, because Howard Sykes had started off, and the questions were planted, the responses were planted in a way to support the council and support the panel at the front, which included that. I mean, if that's the best Greater Manchester Police can do, if the Chief Superintendent, Chris Bowen, is the best that Greater Manchester Police can do, no wonder, no surprise it's in accelerated special measures. The man was a disgrace last night. Diane Williamson struggled her way through her speech. And I could see her struggling away. And at first I thought, she's not written this. And then I realised why she was struggling her way through her speech. The woman, I don't know if it's Shaw or Crompton she represents for the Lib Dem, so you'll have to excuse me. The woman was distraught. She was distraught because she had been lied to. Misled, she used the words, but lied to by Oldham Council. The councillors in charge, the council officers, she'd been misled. She'd been lied to. The cover-up is real. The grooming and gang rape of our town's children took place. But Oldham is worse. Oldham is worse. And Oldham is worse for one specific reason. Now, I hear, and some of those questions were planted, and that ex-councillor Pete Davis was planted there to ask a question. What they're trying to do is prosecute me. They're trying to prosecute me off the back of my position that the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children is to maintain community relations. And what I mean by that is to keep the Asians sweet and keep the votes coming in for the Labour Party the way they are, to keep the status quo the way it is. Now, they want me prosecuted. So that's why they're asking those questions. They can prosecute me all they want. The issue is, as we've known all along, is that these buffoons think we're stupid. We're not stupid. The terms of reference of that assurance review was not to determine why there was a cover-up. It was not to determine that at all. It was to determine if there was a cover-up and if our children had been groomed and gang raped. Both of these things are proven. Now, it was not Newsom and Ridgway's remit to determine why. They've made a big song and dance of determining why, or why they believe, but it's like me being let loose in one of my friends' kitchens in one of their fancy restaurants. I'd blow something up. I'd definitely burn something. It was not in the remit to investigate why there was a cover-up. The remit was specifically if there was a cover-up and if children had been groomed and gang raped. So, Amanda Chadderton, Paul Bentwhistle, Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen, prosecute me. Come and arrest me. Bring it on. Absolutely bring it on. It was not in the remit to make that statement, to investigate that. It's not in the terms of reference. But what makes it worse for Oldham? What makes it worse for Oldham and why a public inquiry is needed in Oldham? This is fundamentally why a public inquiry is needed in Oldham. And we did not know the extent of this. I did not know the extent of this. I made the disclosure that Shabir Daddy Ahmed was employed by Oldham Council, and in his role as Oldham Council, he had access to vulnerable children and parents. I also disclosed Shabir Ahmed was a Labour Party member with links to serving politicians sat in that room last night. It has since emerged that Shabir Daddy Ahmed was on the payroll of Oldham Council for 18 years, and he was based out of the Oldham Council-funded Pakistani Community Centre in Glodwick that was run by a management committee which included other councillors, Labour Party councillors, and council officers. Shabir Daddy Ahmed, to all extents and purposes, was being paid by the council to use council facilities to pimp out white working class girls. The council were funding the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. That's essentially what took place. You follow that logic through. He was paid for the council. He did his business whilst in the employment of the council at council-funded venues. Shabir Ahmed was paid by Oldham Council to pimp out white girls. And not only was Shabir Ahmed paid by Oldham Council to pimp out white girls, once allegations against him emerged, and these are allegations that the council should have took action against, as confirmed in that report, the investigations against him were inexplicably, and that's the word from out of the report, inexplicably closed down. That demonstrates council complicity in covering up for the most prolific sexual grooming gang, child sex exploitation grooming gang ringleader this country has ever known. Thousands of children, tens of thousands of rapists. And this was done, funded by the taxpayers of Oldham. You, yes, I lived in the town at the time, you, me, and everyone else in this town paid for Shabir Ahmed to groom, gang rape, and sell our children. And they just don't get it. They just don't get it. The meeting commenced with a prayer. And this is the contempt they hold you in. This is the contempt they hold us in. It began with a prayer from the Reverend Canon Jean Hurlston. I'm going to just play this. Just give me a second, because I want you all to hear this prayer, and then I want to give you some context to it. Just give me 1 second.
Proper support is provided by the right agencies and any safeguarding concern.
No way avoided addressing this, and in fact saw successful disruption.
Yes. Let us. O God, grant each of us in this chamber openness of heart and mind to receive this report, to face up to events from the past and commit to creating a better future for Oldham's children and young people. Help us to debate with positivity, humility, respect, and an eagerness to learn from all who contributed to the findings of this report. Amen.
Amen.
So what she wanted you to do was pray for the people who wrote the report. Nothing about praying for the victims, nothing about praying for the children who suffered these horrific crimes, and people mocked her. People around me mocked her. And I found it difficult, but I also found it difficult not to agree with them. They mocked her because of what she was praying for. And do you know who she is? This is the contempt they treat us with. Reverend Canon Jean Hurlston is an active member of the Labour Party. Or, if not, she's active in the Labour Party. I'm reading some of her tweets. Warm reception by CLP UK Labour for Ashton and Labour last Friday night when I was guest speaker. She's thanking Angela Rayner. I'll read another one. Great progress. And among Labour's new intake, Prit Gill, the UK's first female Sheik MP. Good for women and good for the country. This is an active Labour person. She's the founder of Oldham Street Angels, who I think are funded by the council. So there's that as well. And she's linked to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who did this report. It's all on a Twitter handle, linked to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So she set the mood for that meeting. Good morning, Gary. And yes, that wound me up as well. They take us for fools. They now are trying to manipulate God to support them. That's how desperate it's got. They're trying to bring God into it and hide behind religion, hide behind a prayer. And they get some Labour Party affiliated woman, chaplain, to do it. Why don't you just get one of those Catholic priests in? I'm sure one of them must be coming towards the end of the sentence now. And get one of them to do it. I'm sure the chairman of Oldham Central Mosque or the ex-chairman of Oldham Central Mosque would have done it for him. Scandalous. Absolutely scandalous. So, I just wanted to reflect with you of what's going on here. Forget Amanda Chadderton, she's finished. Amanda Chadderton's political career is over, and it's over because her and all of her Labour Party colleagues want to move on. Remember, this review was time limited. This review has been exposed for withholding evidence from its own dodgy authors. The review's been, the council and the police have been exposed, proven to have hidden evidence. So it's been proven to have hidden evidence. And then she wants us to move on. A 3-year window, 11 victims. Let's be clear, 11 victims of which they interviewed none of them until one forced them. The 10 other testimonies have been hidden away. And she wants us to move on. They won't even say how many of our children were groomed and gang raped during the period they did their investigation. Amanda Chadderton, the leader of the Oldham Council, is blocking calls for a public inquiry. She won't support one. She claims if it's not good enough for her daughter, it's not good enough for the town. And what she wants us to do, and her panel wants us to do, what her and her panel want us to do is move on. They want us to believe them that Oldham today is a different Oldham to the one that was investigated. Well, as Diane Williamson said, Councillor Diane Williamson from the Liberal Democrats said, she was misled and lied to. She was misled. She's saying officers of the council lied to her. She's saying officers of the council lied to her. The reports lied to her. She represents the people. She was lied to. How can that woman face her constituents in Shaw? How? So Howard Sykes quickly read the room, spoke to my mate Moyab, and Moyab goes, when it changes, Raja, what they do is send a text message on the phone. All the others get the instructions and they move to plan B. And plan B was to go on the all-out attack. And it finished with Kenyon and Salah Al-Hamdani. Now, everyone knows I'm not Sam's fan. I don't think I'll ever be on his Christmas card list. But he got up and asked a specific question that could not be answered. None of the questions were answered, by the way, but this question was very relevant. The review team confirms that Greater Manchester Police failed to cooperate with them the way we would have liked. The review team confirms that. The Police and Crime Commissioner, Beverly Hughes, Andy Burnham's deputy, used the word candor, in less than candid, less than candor, whatever she was trying to say in a posh way. What she was effectively saying was that the police lied to her and misled her and deceived the review team. That's what that term means. And that Chris Bowen is sat on the ender, smirking. He looked at me a few times, Chris, as did the chief executive, Dirty Harry Caffrell, and that numpty next to you, Gerard Jones. Should have got up and come to the public gallery bit. See how long any of you would have lasted. The people are outraged because of what you've done and what you're continuing to do. This is a cover-up, and the Lib Dems, I'm genuinely surprised, got up and are also wanting a public inquiry. Shabir Ahmed, the council funded for the pimping of white girls. That's what took place in Oldham. The council funded for the pimping of white children. It was a council-funded venture. Join the dots up, and how else do you describe it? You paid his wages, you gave him a base, and that base was funded by the council and a management committee involved councillors and council officers. You paid for him to set up shop and pimp children. And from what I can gather of he had access to vulnerable children and adults, you paid for him to identify his victims. And Amanda Chadderton and her Labour Party mates want to block a public inquiry. I've never seen it. And Andy Burnham sat there knowing that this has damaged him. How does it feel, Burnham? I know your team watches this. How does it feel to face educated working class folk? Not just angry, but educated working class folk who won't be shouted down and won't be intimidated. And then he tried to give us a lesson. He tried to give us a lesson in respect. You've got teenage girls, Andy. You go and have them groomed and gang raped. And let's see you be given a lesson in respect. Let's see how respectful you are if your own children were groomed and gang raped. And then the authorities tried to cover it up. How respectful would you be? I think the townsfolk yesterday were more than respectful. They behaved with dignity and integrity in a way that none of them on that podium would know. Robert Barnes stood up and confronted Gerard Jones. Those of you who don't know who Gerard Jones is, or didn't know until yesterday who Gerard Jones was. Gerard Jones is the managing director for children and young people. He appears on the Town Hall Rich list. He's that well paid. I think his wages are something like £10,000 a month. It's a six-figure package. His wages are something like £10,000 a month and he's on a gold-plated pension. Gerard Jones spent the evening smirking at people. He spent the evening smirking at members of the public. Robert Barnes stood up and called him out for it. Councillor Robert Barnes stood up and called him out for it. So I'm not making this up. The director for children and young people, the managing director, Oldham Council's managing director for children and young people, sat on that podium, not just lying and deceiving you. He spent the evening smirking at you. He spent the evening smirking at you. John was sat in front of me. We saw it, didn't we, John? I'm not making this up. Gerard Jones first came to my attention in a Guardian article where he featured alongside Andy Burnham. It was about this time last year. I didn't know who he was. You know, I saw the Town Hall Rich list in terms of £120,000 or whatever it was. I just shrugged. I thought, yeah, well, there you go. What else do you expect? But he came to my attention about this time last year because he was advocating, and I can't, to this day, I've not worked out what it was, a council policy, but he did it in his role as managing director for children and young people. He was advocating for COVID jabs for children. So that's what he was trying to push through. Gerard Jones, and I've never seen this in my life, Councillor Brian Hoban stood up and called Gerard Jones a liar. And the reason why Councillor Hoban called Gerard Jones a liar, and I've never seen this, I've never seen a councillor in my life stand up and call a council officer in a council meeting like this a liar. Councillor Hoban called Gerard Jones a liar, and then Burnham got stuck because Gerard Jones claims the council supported Sophie's testimony. They worked, you know. So Gerard Jones basically sat on this committee that decided who went to give evidence and who didn't. They were the conduit. They were the gatekeepers. I got the impression the ex-chief executive was also there, from what he admitted. They won't say who, by the way. These questions were asked repeatedly. They won't say who. They refused to say which one of them were responsible or sat on this committee. And Maggie Oliver has gone on record. Maggie Oliver has gone on record that the council and GMP, so it's this committee, blocked Sam from giving her testimony. And she had to go and bypass them and go directly to Newsom and Ridgway. Maggie Oliver is on record for saying the reasons that the committee gave to Newsom and Ridgway was, one, she didn't want to give evidence, and two, if they approached her directly, she would commit suicide. There's a recording I've shared with a few of you, smuggled out of that meeting, where Ridgway confirms they were blocked from speaking to her. Gerard Jones, Councillor Brian Hoban called Gerard Jones a liar because the evidence exists that that committee interfered with the inquiry. The very committee tasked with gathering evidence, identifying and supporting witnesses and victims, bugger all victims, by the way, remember, has now been proven to have interfered. And Gerard Jones, from what I can tell, is neck deep in it, and Councillor Brian Hoban has called him out as a liar. What should happen is Gerard Jones should be immediately suspended. This is worse than gross misconduct. This is a criminal offence. This is worse than gross misconduct. This is a criminal offence. The man sat next to him, Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen, instead of both of them whispering into each other's ears throughout the meeting, what should have happened is Chris Bowen should have been arresting Gerard Jones. That's what should have happened. Amanda Chadderton was disgraceful throughout the meeting. The position of leader is beyond her competency. And she's clearly not in charge. And I'll tell you why she's clearly not in charge. Because repeated questions were asked about this council's relationship with Shabir Ahmed, and she tried to be smart. I didn't start until after Shabir Ahmed had gone to prison. No one asked you that question. Why do you lot not answer questions, and when you decide to answer questions, you answer questions that were never asked? The question is very specific. It is very specific about a reference provided to Shabir Ahmed to help keep him out of prison. So after he'd groomed and gang raped children, and my friend Moyeb Uddin has shared names of it, and he's named a counsellor. He's named a counsellor, and the consequence of what happened to Moyeb Uddin after he named a counsellor was, within hours, someone tried to burn his family house down. That's right, people. Those of you who are joining me who've never joined me before, within hours of my friend, a senior civil servant and former counsellor, naming Abdul Jabbar, deputy leader of Oldham Council, someone tried to burn his family house down. By the time I got there, it was very clear that if the fire had took, people would have died. They would have been murdered. They would have been burnt alive. And the police saying, "Oh, it was kids." As Moyeb's mother said to me, Raja, I've been here since 1976. His father arrived in January. I followed him in March. Not even the National Front did this to us. Not even the National Front did this to us. So, Moyab's named Abdul Jabbar to answer a simple question. His relationship and knowledge with Shabir Daddy Ahmed. And he's not the only one who was sat in that room who knew Shabir Daddy Ahmed. And that he worked for the council. And that he was involved in the grooming and gang rape of children. Abdul Jabbar was sat 3 meters away, if that, from Amanda Chadderton. She would not answer the question as to whether Abdul Jabbar, in his capacity as mayor of this town, has supported Shabir Ahmed. She wouldn't even ask Abdul Jabbar and ask us. Abdul Jabbar wasn't for answering. All he was doing was sliding and sliding and sliding down his desk, sliding down the chair, trying to hide underneath the desk. And the councillors I know in the background were pointing at each other and saying, yeah, he knew him. Yeah, he knew him. Amanda Chadderton is not in control of this council because Abdul Jabbar and the cartels are. Because if the leader of Oldham Council, if the new leader of Oldham Council was in control of this council, she would have pointed to Jabbar and said, Jabbar, stand up. There's 100 of our townsfolk here. We are all outraged that the council funded and protected Shabir Ahmed and supported him, complicit in his activities. Did you or did you not give a reference to Shabir Ahmed? Did you know Shabir Ahmed? But she does not control the council. Jim McMahon controls the council. Jim McMahon is reliant on a bloc Muslim vote, and there is video footage. I have video footage somewhere of Jim McMahon and Abdul Jabbar in a meeting where Abdul Jabbar celebrates and McMahon's nodding away. Not sure if he's got a samosa or 2 in his hands. Nodding away because when it came to the Greater Manchester vote, Coldhurst turned out big time for Andy Burnham. I think the claim was Coldhurst gave him the most votes than any ward in Greater Manchester. And this is why the Conservatives, Pam Byrne, and I saw some of her earlier drafts and I think she's done well. I'm not her fan. She can't stand me. But I'm not here for me. I'm not her fan. She can't stand me. But she stood up and spoke well. She stood up and spoke well. And what she said was she wants an inquiry, an investigation outside of the control of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, outside of Burnham's influence, outside of Labour's influence. That's what she's saying. That's what she's saying. They can say it's nonsense. So, they said the grooming and gang rape of our town's children were barefaced lies. There's 3 Pakistani lads who weren't let in. Brave lads turned up. There were a couple inside. Brave. You don't know how much bravery it takes for these people to speak out. I think this lad's one of them. He'll tell you about the cartels. He'll tell you about the block votes and the postal votes needing to be hand-delivered and what happens if he don't. Pam Byrne spoke well. And you know it's gone wrong. You know it's gone wrong for Andy Burnham when Max Woodvine got up. And I shouldn't have been in stitches, but at that I was in stitches. I don't know if you've ever, some of you will be able to relate to this. In my earlier days, we'd fight. You know, like all kids growing up would fight. And the fights were, you know, sometimes we'd had gang fights, yeah? And you've beaten someone up or you've been in a fight and they've had enough. You know, whoever you're fighting against has had enough. And then your little mate comes charging in to get the last digs in and shout the loudest. And you'll look around and you smile at the little fella kicking this big guy, you know, getting the last kicks in, and you're pulling him away, laughing to yourself, and you're all laughing to each other. And that was Max Woodvine. Max Woodvine went for Andy Burnham. Max Woodvine went for Andy Burnham. You know it had changed when Max Woodvine went for Andy Burnham. Max Woodvine went for Andy Burnham. Brian Hoban refused to sit down when instructed by the mayor. Mark Wilkinson refused to be intimidated. They've come a long way, haven't they? Have they not come a long way? Lewis Quigg. Good. First speech. But come on. For me, the standout speech was Robert Barnes. There was no holding back in Robert Barnes' speech. And that's why he defeated Arood Shah. Who, by the way, it is now over a year since her car was blown up. And I've seen pictures of her receiving an award or something from Greater Manchester Police yesterday. The police won't issue a statement on the leader's car being blown up, but they gave her an award yesterday. And this is why the council and the Greater Manchester Police and the cartels are all interwoven like this. And it needs an independent inquiry. A judge-led independent inquiry. And the 100 of you that turned up, the place was packed. They've left the screens up to protect the councillors, actually, apparently. Nothing to do with COVID. It's a decision taken by Dirty Harry Caffrell. They created the structure of a Belfast courtroom, and they got worse than a Belfast courtroom. I am grateful to Julie Hayward and the other lady who shooed off the security guards who had tried to kick me out. I didn't get her name. I just looked behind my shoulder at these two security guards. That was the actions of not just Harry Caffrell, but the head of Constitutional Services. She will be sacked. The day we take our town back, she will be sacked. We don't need to be paying £70,000, £80,000 to someone like that. Elizabeth Drogan. Liz Drogan is her name. Head of Constitutional Services. I don't think they understand. They work for us. The councillors represent us and the officers work for us. I don't think they understand. I don't think they understand. There was no violence from any of us. There was never going to be any violence from any of us. I think the worst I heard was Debbie Cole swearing. I'm not going to call her out for it. I understand it. We behaved with the integrity that these people can only dream of. We are, aren't we, Kessa? In fact, exactly that. Exactly that. Exactly that. These guys, Burnham, you sat there, you wanted an independent inquiry for Hillsborough. I am a Liverpool fan, by the way. People know I am a Liverpool Football Club fan. I am a season ticket holder. My family and I have been going to Liverpool for God knows how many years. My first memory is of my father sitting down on it with a radio with an aerial all the way up to the ceiling of the 1977 Cup final. So the Hillsborough thing is very dear to me. And the injustice those families suffered. And the narrative that the establishment spun. Shying away from what they've done. And to this day, not a single person has been prosecuted. They've all got away with it. Let's face it. They've admitted it was wrong, but they've all got away with it. Not a single person's been held responsible. We will not allow that in our town. The mood in that meeting last night was not whether or not the girls are to be believed. We believed our children from the beginning. The mood in that room last night was not, isn't it awful what happened to these young children? We're past that. We've dealt with it for 20 years. We're past that. The mood in that room yesterday was, we want people held to account. This isn't Rotherham. This isn't Rochdale. We have councillors and the people of the town speaking with a united voice, and it's directed at that fake liberal metropolitan elite like Gerard Jones and all the others who just fleece us of our money, take whatever money they can out of us, and go back to the South Manchester homes. And the Labour Party politicians who sat there, said nothing and sat there. Shabir Ahmed was one of theirs. They sat on this because of the block vote. And if it wasn't because of the block vote, why did they sit on this? Are we that stupid? Are we that stupid to believe it was one mistake after another mistake after another mistake, and they still won't tell us how many mistakes they made? How many of our children were groomed and gang raped? They still won't tell us. And they want to move on. They want to give us, Amanda Chadderton wants to assure us this town, her council is not the same. She reads Ofsted reports, selective quotes out of Ofsted reports. Ofsted existed in 2009. Ofsted existed in 2005. Ofsted did not pick up on this in 2005, 2009 because you covered it up. As Diane Williamson said, she was misled and you misled Ofsted. Your council misled Ofsted. What's to say they've not misled them now? I don't believe you. My town doesn't believe you. The councillors sat in that chamber don't believe you. And Andy Burnham sits on his hands. Why, Andy? Why are you sat on your hands? Gerard Jones called and it happened in that meeting at one point when you were looking at each other because it was, the conflict was there. Burnham's team were being called liars by Gerard Jones. Gerard Jones, the managing director of Children and Young People Services, was calling Burnham's investigators and calling Maggie Oliver a liar. And that the council cooperated fully with the inquiry. It didn't. Or are we calling Maggie Oliver a liar? Are we calling Sam a liar? Are we still at that place where we're calling victims liars? I know yesterday we were still at a place where that police officer, Chris Bowen, his team, Operation Sherwood, disgraced by the way, Its first actions was to attack and intimidate victims. I've got the police officer's name. The young woman sent me a name yesterday. Names are important. Names are always important. Julie Howell. There's someone called Julie Howell, Howell, who is in charge of Operation Sherwood. I don't know what her rank is, but it's Julie Howell. Are you proud of yourself, Julie Howell? Your team phoning up a young victim and intimidating her and trying to imply that because she's come forward and shared with the town what you did to her and what you helped facilitate, your police force, you had no right to threaten her. No right to threaten a young woman like that. No right at all. Amanda Chatterton's career is over. Yesterday wasn't just the end of Amanda Chatterton. It was the end of the Labour Party in Oldham. And as for that, I won't swear I'm. As for Pete Davis, apparently, and he used different words, I think, Anita. He used different words, but apparently I'm grandstanding. This, by the way, is the former gardener of Jim McMahon. That's how he became a councillor. He's the former gardener of Jim McMahon. Do I look like I'm grandstanding? This is far, far from over. This town is not going to move on from this. One challenging meeting and then they can carry on is what they want. I'm going to, as soon as I can get my head around this, I will analyze the videos for you. It's a 3-hour transmission, by the way. It's a 3-hour broadcast last night, 3.5 hours. So it'll take me about 3 chunks of an hour. So if you find value in what I do, there's a buy me a coffee link. This is how I earn my income, by the way. This is my, I'm not unemployed as people claim. This is how I earn my living. And if you don't get value in this, if you think you get it elsewhere, that's fine. But I've looked at the Oldham Times. I've looked at Charlotte Green's reporting. You're not going to get the truth from them. It's going to be spun to protect those who failed our children. Yeah, they didn't answer any questions. I'll take some questions now. And whilst I'm here, I've got a cup of coffee in my hand. There's 167 of you with me. So I'm more than happy to take some coffee, drink some coffee, and I'll try and answer your questions. I'm not a liar. I don't hide. As you've seen, I'm not in the business of hiding. So if you've got questions, put them up. I'll drink my coffee and I'll answer them. If you want to buy me a coffee, please do buy me a coffee. I think he's no longer being paid, Steve. I heard his questions. I don't follow him on Twitter or any of those things. I don't think he's no longer in the good books of the council. Now, where this is going to get interesting is he's on public record come out and claimed, defended Jim McMahon's use, the Lee Rigby letter email. So it's going to get interesting. You know what it is? They took an ideological position that this guy, as in me, doesn't know what he's talking about. We can go for him, we can get him, and we can, we can do well from aligning ourselves with senior politicians like McMahon. But the truth is the truth. The truth is the truth. And as much as I have no time for the likes of Neil Wilby, he does claim he's an investigative journalist. And it's hard to avoid the truth of what's gone on here. The investigation is a sham. The structure, the framework of it allowed the council and the police to hide evidence. It was overseen by the GMCA and Andy Burnham's team and the Labour lot, who are essentially being investigated. It's nowhere near independent. And reading, you don't have to read between the lines. Reading the contradictions throughout the report, it's clear that that report's been tampered with. It's clear that that report's been tampered with. So I think he's about to bite the hand that feeds him, or has fed him. Something about, and I know some of my friends have dogs, so I don't mean in that way. But, you know, there's an old saying about dogs and fleas. They won't even tell us that, John, will they? I agree with you. They won't even tell us how many of our children had been groomed and gang raped. And as the 3 Pakistani lads, 4 Pakistani lads, my friend Moyeb, a few others turned up, this is no longer just white people angry. Increasingly, more and more Asian people in our communities are saying, we have had enough. We're not going to sit by either. No, mate, it's because the questions, people know the questions are a joke. And also the questions, if you look at the questions, a lot of them were loaded by the likes of, what she called Helen Bishop. I know Helen. I won't be disrespectful to her, but she's a lefty. She's an ultra lefty. And she wanted to focus the questions on, you know, how are we moving on? How, you know, share with us how it's all better now. I'm not there. Most of my town isn't there. We want those who were responsible for the cover-up, named, shamed, sacked, and prosecuted. I have asked Brian Hoban, because I spoke with him on the way out, and Mark Wilkinson. I have asked the Failsworth Independents to expand into Hollingwood. They need to expand into Hollingwood for 2 reasons. One, having 6 Failsworth councillors, which is what they'll probably end up with next May, is not going to be enough for them to achieve their ambitions of delegated budgets and more devolved power in Failsworth. It's not going to be enough. If they could manage to expand into Hollingwood and have 9 councillors, it creates a township. It's what's known as a township. And Failsworth and Hollingwood, under a new council structure led by other people, would have that. But why I'm talking about this, David, is that it would give them 9 councillors and take 3 more councillors away from Labour. And those are 3 very, very safe Labour seats. We need to get those 3 seats out from Labour. I've dropped a message to the Conservatives. I'm not, you know, I drop a message to anyone. It doesn't mean maybe Debbie Abrams will stand up in Parliament again and rant and rave. Debbie Abrams, you do understand I'm not a criminal. I've not got a criminal record. I'm a campaigner. This is legal, Debbie. You do understand this is legal. I know you find it uncomfortable, Debbie. But what I do, educating my townsfolk and being a voice for them, is not unlawful. Actually, Debbie, it's what you should be doing. You should have been at that council meeting in the public gallery supporting us. So we need to take Hollingwood over, reduce the Labour Party majority, and I've spoken to the Conservatives, as in I've sent them a message. I'm looking forward to them confirming, because they're there, that should they win, should we take over the council, should we remove Labour Party from power, our manifesto pledge, we pledge to the town that we will call for a public inquiry. We will call for a public inquiry. I think the Lib Dems are there already. The Lib Dems are there already, it was clear. By the way Sam Al-Hamdani spoke, by the way Kenyon spoke, And sorry, Councillor Kenyon, I forget your first name. And by the way, Diane Williamson spoke. Councillor Williamson spoke. I think they're there already. The Gloucesters are in trouble. I think there's something else going on there. The council meeting was 3.5 hours, wasn't it? I mean, I'll do an analysis of it, and I'll break it up into bite-sized chunks if I can spare the time. They released, John, they released that CSE report, their response, before the report had been launched at their press release. They came out first, which meant they had sight of it. What they want to focus on is that the cover-up wasn't politically motivated. And it wasn't in exchange for votes. Now, if it wasn't in exchange for votes, I'm very clear. It was in exchange to protect a community where the votes they rely on come from. And as Councillor Quigg yesterday confirmed, extracted from the report, there's confirmation in that report that they kept what was going on from me and you because of community cohesion. That means the impact it would have on race relations. No. What they then mean by that, there's two bits to that, is that angry white people will come out and vote. And they'll vote against them. So they hid it from you. It's confirmed. The report confirms it. You've got to turn the language around to understand it, but the report confirms it. The council's strategy was apparently to go after the grooming gangs, disrupt. That was their strategy. Lewis Quigg, was it Lewis Quigg? Lewis Quigg asked a specific question, and Gerard Jones lied. He outright lied in his response, and it's on the feed, because I wanted to make sure it was clear before I said this. It's on the news feed from Charlotte Green in her response. Gerard Jones claimed schools had been informed. It's clear. So, you know, when the shisha bars were going on, Gerard Jones claims schools had been informed. It's clear in the report, it's in black and white in the report, that schools had not been informed, even though there had been an agreement to inform schools. There had been a high-level agreement at a multi-agency meeting to inform schools because parents needed to know what was going on. That was the decision. And yet schools were not informed and parents were not informed. So McMahon, Rayner and Debbie Abrahams, it's nonsense. They're in trouble. They are in trouble. So the way we get a public investigation, David, is we take control of the council. And we support the parties. We support the parties who pledge to a public inquiry, to support a public inquiry, and we vote them in. Whether it's Lib Dem, whether it's FIP, whether it's the Conservatives. Labour are finished. The only place Labour are going to hold are in the cartel areas. And even then, I think there's an insurgency coming. He, when I was speaking at the front, he was looking at me and smiling away. Him and Aftab were smiling away. And you know why they were smiling away? Because they know that Jabbar was involved with Shabir Ahmed. They know Jabbar was involved with Shabir Ahmed. Abdul Jabbar, by the way, should be forced to resign. If Amanda Chadderton was in control rather than Jabbar and the cartels and McMahon, Amanda Chadderton would sack Abdul Jabbar in the same way Sean Fielding should have sacked Arud Shah. Sean Fielding has privately admitted he made a mistake. And he should have got rid of her at the time. Amanda Chadderton, if she was really in charge of this council and she wasn't a proxy for Jim McMahon, she would immediately sack her deputy leader, Councillor Abdul Jabbar, and issue a statement confirming, clarifying what the council did. Sorry, that's one of my friends contacting me. He's probably got information, but I wouldn't want to put him on the spot. Yeah, my problem, David, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, and I'm not touting for anything, by the way, but, you know, a 3.5 hour edit is going to take me 2 days to do, you know, and edit it down and all the rest of it. David, I think we're coming to a point where we need a public meeting. We need a public meeting. If they won't facilitate a public meeting, we, the townsfolk, should have a public meeting, and we should invite the opposition leaders to sit on the dais alongside us and agree a shared way forward. And it is my opinion we should hire Chadderton Town Hall, where Jim McMahon has his office with his £100,000 refurbished toilets at your expense, and we should hire that venue and hold it there. I think the opposition leaders, Brian Hoban, Howard Sykes, if not Sykes, Sam Al-Hamdani will do it, more than likely. And Brian Hoban and the Fellsworth Independents and some of the other independents should come together and host a public meeting. This is one of the reasons they can't stand me. We keep going and banging our head against the wall. That's the council. We have no need to bang our head across the wall. That's the Labour Council. We can circumnavigate them. We can develop an appreciation and understanding of how to effectively campaign and achieve outcomes ourselves. Yeah, forget that. Bollocks. No chance. I know John. No chance. Absolutely no chance. I like John. I spoke to him yesterday. He came. He brought his mother with him. No chance. Maybe if John aligns it, you know, gets in with FIP, I don't know. But you're not going to get in. You're not going to get him over the line. And I like John. I get on with John. I don't agree with him politically. I think some of his stuff is borderline racist. But I understand where he comes from and where he gets it from. And at the end of the day, he's a child of my town, and I have a responsibility to him. John was there. Or he was there earlier. He was there with his mother. His mother, she weren't well. He was there. I spoke to him, and I spoke to his mother. So he was there. Thank you. Yes, he was there. Yeah. They're claiming that Jim McMahon email. I mean, but that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. They weren't tasked. The review team's terms of reference was not tasked to determine whether it was a cover-up or not. In terms of Jim McMahon and the political stuff, it was tasked as to, were children groomed and gang raped? Did the authorities fail them? And then did the authorities cover it up? Have a look at the terms of reference. They've gone into a sphere. Instead of looking at more children being groomed and gang raped, they've decided to go into a space to protect these McMahon and Debbie Abrams and the others. There was an embargo to the press of when they could discuss the report or not. And actually, Amanda Chadderton's right. The embargo to the press doesn't apply to her. She's the leader of the council. And she has a right to inform the public of, you know, there'll be an announcement on Monday or Tuesday or whatever. She's got that right to do that. That was from Wilby. That was. You know, he'll pick a fight in an empty room. I think by now that's clear. You know, that's his mindset. But Amanda Chadderton has every right to ask to release information as and when she sees fit. If there was an embargo to the press, which there was, and I shared that with you, remember? I shared that with you. The press already have copies. If there was an embargo to the press, she's not embargoed from saying there's a meeting with the public. We elect her. We can take them out. If the opposition can get coordinated, put aside some of their differences, not only will the council move into no overall control, Labour will become the minority party in that council. That's exactly what I'm saying. Bypass them. What's stopping us holding a public meeting? Chadderton Town Hall? I don't know how much it costs, but I'm sure between us would raise the money. Now, I said some of his views are. I don't believe he's a racist. I chat to him. I think some of his views are. You see, I can differentiate because I spent my life working in that space. I can work out the difference between a racist and someone whose views are and such, and I can work that out. I'm comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable having that conversation directly with John at some point, but he's fundamentally better. John, and this is where this town has repeatedly gone wrong. If you want to win in Hollingwood, some new political party like that, with the narrative it has, isn't going to get the turnout to win. It's been proven time after time after time, and the FIP model works. Local people fighting on local issues can oust. You don't need national parties. The national parties is just another party coming in. People won't go for it. Local people fighting on local issues can take on established Labour Party councillors and take them out. FIP have demonstrated it effectively. Montez has demonstrated it. And it can be done. No idea, mate. But, you know, like I keep saying to all of you lot, I'm not really, it's not my town. I'm not really that interested. We agree a strategy. And if that strategy involves a petition directly to Parliament, and so be it, and the Prime Minister. But again, DC, we keep doing this, and we keep doing this, and we keep doing this. We go to someone else and ask for permission. I think you can see by now, I'm not in the business of asking permission when it comes to democracy. I'm in the business of holding them to account. Why would you go and ask permission? We can launch our own independent inquiry if need be. Once we take control of the council, we can launch our own victim-led independent inquiry. Who are the experts in this? Who knows most of what's happened here? We can launch our own victim-led independent inquiry sponsored by a council that we have influence over. Put a buffet on. Get the Tories and the Lib Dems to put it on their expenses. John can speak for himself and I can speak with him. I'll leave that there. I wonder if they get a discount if they hire it themselves, if one of the parties hire it. Brian, Mark, you're probably watching this. Mark's probably watching this because Mark is now retired. Mark, do you get a discount? Find out. Phone up Constitutional Services. Phone up Liz Drogan and say we want to host a public meeting at Chadderton Town Hall And do political parties, the councillors get a discount for it? See what she says. See what she says. Any more questions? I'll try and do the analysis. It'll take me about a day and a half's work. And then have to be split over three 1 hour sessions. Yesterday was the end of the Labour Party in Oldham. It was the end of Gerard Jones's career. The council officers I know are ashamed. The mid-level council officers I know are ashamed of what's gone on. They now work for a council that funded the grooming and gang rape of children. That's what has now emerged. Oldham Council facilitated, to all extents and purposes, Oldham Council, the Labour Party controlled Oldham Council, funded the grooming and gang rape of children.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.